evil is amongst us. Stay back, boy. This calls for divine intervention. I kick ass for the Lord.
Failing to indict a criminal sitting president sends the message that those in power are above the law. DaShanne Stokes. For such men are false prophets, deceitful workers, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for even Satan disguised himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. Their end will correspond to their deeds. 2 Corinthians 11:13-15. Let's talk about the failed promise to drain the swamp of D.C. Welcome to Heresy and Hearsay, a podcast to reclaim faith in a context of political discussion. I'm Reverend Barney, and you can follow me on Twitter at SethRothII, and you can follow the show on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and any podcast catcher. Just look for Heresy and Hearsay. Please like, share, follow, and subscribe to us. Also give us a review. That helps others find us as well. I'm doing this solo, but as always, you can find my partner and better half of the podcast, September, on Twitch and Twitter at 9 of 12, and you can hear her on the Geek Grills podcast. She is also working for her campaign deal. She did her last show, I believe, for Geek Grills tonight. And that's already up on their YouTube channel and will be up on their podcasts in a couple of days, so please catch that as well and continue to support the Geek Grills after while she is on hiatus working for the Biden campaign. Heresy and Hearsay also has a Patreon site where you can find us at patreon.com/heresy and hearsay, where you can visit to support us. Just $2 a month goes a long way to help support this humble show. You can also contribute bits in Twitch or subscribe for free if you have Amazon Prime, or you can pay for a subscription at September's 9 of 12's Twitch page. That also helps us a great deal. So today we will be talking about the campaign promise of one Donald Trump and how he was going to drain the swamp of D.C. Now, understand that I am not a financier. I am not a political. When my politics are more social than it is economic. They work together, but understand that nuts and bolts on policy about economics is not my strong suit. I'm more arching, and I look for specific programs that I can focus on, like free education and how that may work, or situations like that. So when we go into lobbyists and how all of that infrastructure works, that is not something I'm super strong about. I don't understand the PAC system at all. Unfortunately, that would be something September would be a little more acute on, and it's these shows. I'm going to miss her a lot, but what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be trying to focus on overarching views. So understand, I'm not going to be getting into the weeds. I'm not going to be getting into the wonkiness of policies. I don't have that in me, so forgive me on this. This one is also not going to be as anger management requirements as some of the other ones may be. I am going to try and keep my promise to September throughout the next 7 weeks and focus on facts and focus on discussions and try to have a discussion about what was said and what was promised and things that didn't happen, and pointing these things out in a non-angry way. Understand that there will be some topics that will upset me when we get into the religion side. That will probably upset me more when we get into the race relation side. That will probably upset me a bit more. But I will do my best to be more heads up and oriented towards a discussion so that you can use some of this information to help those that are on the fence. I don't know how there could be people on the fence still, but if you have people who are on the fence or people that don't pay attention to politics, there are people out there that don't pay attention, that go through their daily lives and just try to make do and try not to focus on the news and try not to listen to the news, or when they look at Facebook, they skip past the news part. And they don't know where they're going, where their vote is going to be. This would be something that could be beneficial to you to help discussions with them. So we'll start with this. We'll start with the financial stuff, and then we'll work into other discussions. Next week, we will probably hit, I haven't quite worked out the 7 weeks, and I apologize. I know that at least in the next couple of weeks, I do want to hit on local elections, so we may do that next week, but we may also do either race or religion next. I know we cover those topics quite often, but those may be two that may come up as well. Or we may hit climate change, and that is important as well. So we may hit one of those three. I know that before we hit all three, there will be a local discussion for North Carolina residents. And also where I will also try to tailor a little bit of that discussion to where you can find information if you're outside of the state, where you can find information about local races in your area, where the best resources for you as far as that's concerned. So let's get into this. Back in 2011, Trump said that he would reveal his tax returns if Obama released his birth certificate. We all remember birtherism. And he was kind of the spearhead of that. And he said he would release his tax returns 2 days later. No, it was 3 days later. I apologize. Obama released his long-form birth certificate. Nothing came from the Trump camp about his tax returns. In 2014, a Irish reporter asked him, hey, remember when you said you would release your taxes if, Obama released his birth certificate? Well, he did that, and you haven't done it. And he moved the goalpost. And he said, well, if I run for president, I'll release them. Well, he ran for president, and we have still not seen his tax returns. And, he talked about, he was under audit, and at that point, the IRS came out and said, you can still show your tax returns. It's not illegal for you not to. You're just under audit, and it's not unusual for billionaires to be under audit all the time. It's just that, there's so much paperwork that they go through, especially with tax breaks and write-offs and stuff like that. And that's because of all those tax loopholes and stuff. So it's not unusual for not just Trump, but Bezos or anybody to go multiple years of having audits. And it's to make sure that, everything is, that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. So it's not unusual, and they could release their tax returns any time. It's not a requirement. Understand this. By law, it is not a requirement for a presidential candidate or a president to release their tax returns, because that's a private thing, much like you don't have to say who you voted for. That's very private. However, it has become kind of the norm for a long period of time now, and it still hasn't been done by Trump because he feels that he doesn't have to because he's above that. So he did not keep his promise. So how can we trust who he is connected to as a human being in his business endeavors or his past business endeavors? And we'll get to that in a second. Or current business endeavors, if we don't see his tax returns and see who he owes money to, who has investments in his properties and things like that, because that makes a difference. Because if he has foreign investors that are connected to him that can pull strings, that can make a difference on what he does as far as his service, as far as what he does as a president. Which comes to the second point of this discussion, which is that Trump never truly divested from his holdings. Most presidents who have any type of financial holdings of any sizable or even unsizable measure put their, and vice presidents as well, put their, especially presidents, most politicians in general do this, some don't, and that's why they get caught doing things, and that's why they go to jail. We'll get to that in a second too. But most of them put them in a blind trust. What a blind trust is, in its base term, is that you put all your eggs into this basket, and you hand this off to a complete and total stranger, and then you turn your back, and they do whatever they need to manage that basket to make sure those eggs hatch or whatever. They don't tell you. There's no discussion. You don't know what's going on with your investments. None whatsoever. Trump never did that. And case in point, one of the big one is that people brought up, and I checked it, and a lot of people said that President Carter sold his peanut farm before he became, when he won the presidency. He did not. However, he did put his peanut farm and the running of his peanut farm into, and I remember the story, he did put his peanut farm and how it was handled and all that kind of stuff into a blind trust. Initially, what he wanted done, and they couldn't even do this, is he couldn't even have this kind of control or whatever, is he wanted to make sure that his brother still kept some kind of job of some medium importance on the farm, and they told him, this is a blind trust, period, in the story. You can't even ask for that. So that was one of the stories that came out, and that's why there was a little bit of problems with Carter's brother causing a little bit of issues during his one term as president. But Trump never did that, never really he put it in a trust, but then his children ran it. And that's not a blind trust. That is basically him running it at that point, because he is running the businesses through his children. Because I'm pretty sure his children's like, "Hey, Dad, so should we, sell this or whatever?" I'm sure they ask him a lot. It may not be in front of people, but I'm sure they ask. As much as he's on that cell phone of his that's probably unsecured, which is another story entirely, I'm pretty sure that he still guides that. Also, every time he goes down to one of his resorts, whatever resort he goes to his resorts instead of going to like Camp David or whatever. He goes to one of his resorts when he's going golfing or whatever. And when he does that, the government pays for the security, but also pays for the use of the golf course, pays for everything else. And that is his golf course. So he's basically having the government pay for him to be there. And so that's not helpful either. That's really not a helpful situation as far as the business is concerned when it comes to that situation. So he is not uninvested from his properties. He's not uninvested from his businesses. And because of that, it causes conflicts of interest for anybody. The example I like to give is if I am running a game shop, or let's say I'm running a comic shop, but I also create comics, I am going to make sure that my comics are sold there at a prominent position and are sold at a specific way that they earn the most amount of profit and can outsell other comics at my store. And that's a conflict of interest because I own the store, but I'm also own part of the product that I'm selling. That's a conflict of interest. It's not a very good one, but it's kind of like if, and this has happened more times than not, especially in Republican administrations, where someone in the oil business is the head of the EPA. The EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency, and they're the ones who help design the rules and laws for the environment. And if you run something that can cause spills or cause damage to waterways or whatever, and you're in control of how what kind of piping you use, and if you can get away with writing rules that benefit you and have cheaper piping, and then on top of that make it to where if the pipes break, you are less responsible for that pipe breaking and cleanup, then at that point, that is a conflict of interest. So, Trump's properties in and of themselves are not as huge of a conflict of interest as that per se, but business dealings, because he has international properties in countries that are less than friendly to us, or can be considered enemies with us, can cause, or he gets loans from banks, from businesses that are in countries that are hostile to us, that can cause issues, and that is a conflict of interest, because then he'll be more favorable to countries that are typically not considered allies of ours, and will then turn, for example, the best example I can use, and it's connecting the dots, but there is money that Trump had given to him for some of his properties by banks in Russia, and Russia has a huge conflict with Germany, so that's why Trump is extra hard on Germany about certain situations, and about Europe in general, and that's why he has pressures and doesn't do much with the allies when it comes to NATO, because a weaker NATO benefits Russia, and that is something that is a conflict of interest at that point. So that's not helpful at all. So we're going through that, and there's more to that. There's so many different conflicts of interests when it comes to that. It's not just that. It's not just those. It's not just those couple of things there, but you also have to think about, like I said, when you're looking at like the different. You're looking at the different golf courses he goes to and the money that's being spent there, and things of that nature. That is a conflict of interest in some ways, because most companies or most, when you do things of that nature, when a president goes on vacation, they typically pick a place that they're able to, that is publicly owned. Camp David, I've mentioned that a couple of times. Camp David is one of them. Or it's something that can be secured. It's a temporary situation, like when the first year that Obama went on Christmas vacation, he went and visited his family, and he went to Hawaii because that's where he was raised, and that's where he was born, and that's part of his family life is there, and so they had to pay independent hotels and whatever so that they could stay, or however. I don't know the logistics of how they set that up, but basically it was nothing that Obama was connected to, whereas if Trump was to stay someplace, he's staying in his own resorts, and therefore the government is paying him to stay on vacation at his own place, so he is getting money, and it's kind of a kickback situation at that point. And you are dealing with that kind of situation in ways that is just unprecedented, to be perfectly honest. It's one of those situations where you just don't know how much money that he has spent, in his, at his resorts, that he has gotten back as himself, that has been paid to himself locally, or paid back to himself for doing these kind of things. So that's a big issue. The other thing to that is when you have those kind of situations at that point, is then you are setting yourself up for having legal entanglements about different things. As the quote I read earlier, that was about the whole, all of his, about the trial that happened, and of course he was acquitted by the Senate because it's become political. But to be fair, we've only had three of those trials, and it's very hard to judge how political those could be, because the second one was also very political on the other side. And looking back on it, I think Clinton probably should have been removed from office because he did break the law, or he at least he did perjure himself. So, but when you come off breaking rules and breaking fundamentals and how the government is supposed to work and how everything is supposed to be, other people will see that as well. And those people around you will see that and think that they're above the law as well. And there's a list of people. For one, we'll start with the most recent and kind of work our way down. You have Steve Bannon. As many of you know, Steve Bannon was the proprietor of Breitbart News, otherwise known as Sludge on the internet, a white supremacist website, basically, that supposedly was news. And he was Trump's political guru and one time chief strategist, according to the CNN article. All of these are different articles that are going to be posted in the show notes, as well as in the comments of the YouTube page. And he was charged with defrauding thousands of donors to build a wall, because it was a private fund to supposedly help Trump build his precious wall for Mexico. And basically what it was a slush fund for rich people to buy stuff, yachts and boats and all this kind of stuff. And he was arrested by the post office, which we've had that discussion about the post office, and I just thought it was absolutely hilarious. And so that trial has not happened yet, but it will happen, and we'll see how that goes. The next one is Michael Cohen. He just recently put out a book and was on Rachel Maddow. I have not watched it. I've not read his book because he was slimed. Here's the thing. These people who have come out to Trump after they've been arrested or whatever the case may be, after they've been caught or whatever, they were with Trump for so long. They're still not good people. They can be forgiven, but they're not heroes. Michael Cohen, the only reason he is doing what he's doing is because he got caught and he got arrested and he went to jail. And so now he's trying to recoup some of his losses and everything else. He's not doing this out of, if this money was going to some trust organization or whatever, fine, that would be different, but it's not. And these individuals, they're making money off of, turning on Trump. I think the only one is like his niece, but that's different. That's because that's family, and she's always had a dislike for him because he's always treated that side of the family badly. So, yeah, so understand they're not heroes. They have things to say, and it's important to listen, but they're not heroes. Okay? So just don't put them up on pedestals. They're not heroes. But Michael Cohen, he was the lawyer of Trump, and he was, convicted. He basically pleaded guilty for tax fraud and lying to Congress, and he was the one that basically handled the hush money payments to two women who alleged had past relationships with Trump, who was denying the affairs at the time with these two women. So, he went to jail for I think he went to jail for 3 months, and he's now releasing a book. Then there's Paul Manafort, which was the one-time campaign chairman. And he has been in jail since June 2018 before being released for home confinement. He is serving a 7.5 year sentence after being convicted by a jury of tax and bank crimes in August of 18, then pled guilty to conspiracy and obstructing of justice. He was basically laundering money and tax fraud and illegal foreign lobbying connected to his years of work while he was working for the pro-Russian Ukrainian politicians, and so. And he was one of the links of the chains that Robert Mueller had dealt with. So he was also, and Trump said, I don't know who Paul Manafort was. Paul Manafort was his campaign chair. He was the head of the campaign. Robert Gates was the one-time deputy campaign chairman. He was sentenced to 45 days in jail and 3 years of probation after helping Manafort conceal the $75 million of foreign bank accounts, as they both had worked for the pro-Russia Ukrainian lobby firm, helping try to keep Russia or get a huge foothold for Russia in the Ukraine, and basically also giving the Trump administration links to Russia at that point. Then there is Robert Stone, who was convicted of his crimes for lying to Congress to basically protect the president. And of course, Trump recently commuted his sentence, like days before he was supposed to go to jail. Basically, this guy He was convicted of 7 charges, including lying with Congress, tampering with witnesses, obstructing Congress, as all a part of the Mueller investigation. And of course, he's not going to serve a time jail because Trump, commuted his sentence, meaning that he's not going to spend any time in jail. Then there is Michael Flynn, the one-time security advisor who pled guilty to lying to the FBI about his talks with the Russian ambassador about how to basically undermine the Obama administration well before Trump. So this was during the transition period. So Obama was still president. He was a lame duck, but he was still president. And this was during the transition period. And basically, Flynn was in talks with the Russian ambassador at the time, saying, "Hey, don't worry about what Obama's saying. We'll fix that." And basically, undermining, so go ahead and do what you're doing. We'll fix it. So basically, he was undermining the president, which is a crime. So at that point, he's not in jail right now. They are still back and forth on what the sentence is going to be. And then there's some of those that are a little further out. There's George Papadopoulos, who served 12 days in jail for lying to investigators about his contacts with Russia during the 2016 election. George Nader, who was a campaign foreign advisor. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison by a federal judge in Virginia, streaming to his convictions of child sex crimes. And then there was the first member of Congress to endorse Trump, Chris Collins. He was sentenced to 26 months in prison after pleading guilty to federal charges for insider trading. And of course, then you can't forget the Epstein case and how that is unfolding right now, and how linked or unlinked Trump may be about that, because there's been, I am not going to say one way or the other because I don't know. There has been stories that recently have come out where Trump has banned Epstein for things that were unsavory. But there was also a lot of stories coming out about how he was with Epstein, and I think there was one case of a young lady saying that that she did something with Trump. But again, there's so much in the air about this. Trump and Epstein were friends at one time. We don't know what exactly happened as far as that friendship is concerned, if Trump was a part of that. But he was friends with Epstein, so there is a connection there. And we also know that one of Trump's associates helped get Epstein off the first time when he was convicted of sex crimes in Florida. And then later on, Trump had him as part of his administration. So that is a bit, that has some problems in its own right. But again, I'm not going to say, and I can't say whether or not Trump had any relations with any of these young girls or not. And we may find out later he did. We may find out later he had nothing to do with it, and he may have known, he may have not known. For all we know, if it wasn't in his immediate circle, he probably was oblivious because of just who he is. So, but you have to keep that in the back of your head that there is Epstein too. Further corruption issues. So Trump has been sued over 400, the Trump administration, I should say, has been sued more than 400 times in the last 4 years, over different policy changes about the environment and about all kinds of different things. So, and that's a record that goes back to 1982. So that he has been sued. The administration has been sued more times than anybody else. And of course, if you Google how many times Trump himself has been sued, last check before he became president, it was like over 3,500 times, according to a Wikipedia article I saw. And then USA Today did something similar to that. So, yeah, that's a lot of times for him and his businesses to be sued. Now, I don't know if that is a record per se, but I know that doesn't look good for him as a businessman to be sued that many times. Most businesses don't get sued that much, that stick. And of course, we all know about the Trump University and how he had to settle out of court for that, and there are other cases that are ongoing right now, as far as, there's the libel thing going on right now about the woman that alleged that Trump sexually assaulted her, and we will probably get into his his housewife appeal versus his record on women. That will probably be something we'll touch on. But so there's a lot of those kind of suits out there, and sexual charges, sexual assault cases, and stuff like that. And some of these lawsuits are frivolous and been thrown out, like the Stormy Daniels one. That one was thrown out, and so you had to take some of these with a grain of salt. So, but you also have to understand that he created a university that did get sued, and he had to pay a lot of money. He also had, for example, a nonprofit that nonprofit was shut down in the state of New York because it was really not a nonprofit, because it wasn't doing any nonprofit work, and the money was being funneled back to the Trump family. And New York stepped in and said, nope, that's not going to happen. And if they ever try to open up another nonprofit, they will be highly watched and regulated by the state of New York. That's probably one of the reasons why he moved to Florida, and is probably changing his residency to Florida after this, is so that he doesn't have to deal with that. He is changing his residency. So at the end of this, what does this all mean? Well, this basically means that Trump is the swamp. That Trump is worse than the swamp that he walked into 4 years ago. That he made the swamp swampier. That he brought this cabal, I hate that term, that he brought this group of grifters in, and basically they've been grifting the United States for the last 4 years. Whether it be Bannon or his family or whatever, they've been trying to make money as fast as they can on the backs of the United States, and no matter what. The current Postmaster General is a prime example of that. He has stock in companies that are direct competitors to the United States postal system. So if he can cause the post office to not work as efficiently, so that his businesses can make more money, more money for him, that's another conflict of interest right there. And so when you look at all the conflicts of interest, when you look at all of these stories, and trust me, there'll be stories here that I will post and everything else, you see how corrupt this is, and how just it's not even close. It's when you look at the Obama administration, for example, even when you look at the Bush administration, or when you look at the Clinton administration, and there was none of the Obama administration is probably the closest to clean as far as corruption is concerned. But when you look at, the Bush administration was not the cleanest, but, they weren't grifters trying to make money hand over fist and making sure everybody else was. They had, they had their fingers in a few pots, but that was acceptable for the time frame. It shouldn't be acceptable, period, and that's a whole nother case. But as far as, but this is like unprecedented. And for anybody to say, oh, he's still draining the swamp, oh, look at what he's doing, he's not doing anything but making himself richer and making everybody else poorer. And, and the money that has been siphoned off for, the prime example, that first COVID relief for small businesses. So many big business people that fund Trump's campaigns and stuff got so much of that pie that we're supposed to go to legitimate small businesses. It's unfathomable what everything has gone through and what we still have to deal with as far as that's concerned. So that is, there is still a lot of corruption. There's still a lot of stories out there. I'm just touching an iceberg that is big enough to sink 50 Titanics at once. So we really need to, look at this and those individuals who are like, well, it's not so bad. It's like, oh, it's a lot worse than you think. And we need to make that clear to those individuals. So, as always, before this week's Carrot and Stick, Brother Bowie, will you lead us in a word of prayer?
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us the trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
So this week's carrot goes to Stephen Colbert and The Late Show for putting up videos on voting rules for each state on YouTube so you can share and get everybody ready to vote. Though it is kind of funny that they did that the week after me and September did our show about voting and put up all those links and stuff about the rules and all that kind of stuff. Still, we appreciate Stephen doing that and getting out to a wider audience and letting everybody know how to do that. And they're doing individual states, so you'll see one for each one of the states, all 50 of them. So you'll be able to vote and find out how to do that for yourself. For our stick, that's going to our climate change deniers. So Southern California had a part of Southern California had a temperature of 121 degrees this past weekend. That's not heat index, that's just temperature. 121, that's not Death Valley. 120, that's not the desert. 121 degrees. But we don't have climate change. Oh, wait, the entire West Coast is on fire, but we don't have climate change. And I know it's funny to talk about how, one of the fires was started by a gender reveal party and how that is just really silly. And I'm like, But still, just because one fire happens because of that doesn't mean it didn't start all the fires. Basically, the situation is this: that climate change is real, and I saw a scientist talking about it today, and that since the 1970s, the air in the Southwest is and the West Coast has been getting drier and drier and drier, and as that happens, it basically dries out the timber quicker and quicker and causes it to be much worse than it's, each year. The last, I think, 6 worst forest fires happened in the last couple of years. I read a report about that. Now, and it's not just Trump's fault. I'm not blaming just Trump, but he is just the latest of a long line of deniers. So, he's not helping, but he is not the first person. So keep that in mind. Climate change is real. 121 degrees in Southern California. Climate change is real. With that being said, I want to thank you for joining us here at Heresy and Hearsay. I'm Reverend Barney, and you can follow me on Twitter at SethRothII, and you can follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and any podcast, as well as our website. Just Google us. Don't forget our Patreon page, where $2 a month can keep us going. You can also find my partner September on Twitch and Twitter at 9 of 12, and you can also hear her on the Geek Girls podcast. I want to thank you for listening today, and I say this into the night: there is hope.